Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. I'm here again with Jonathan from the House of Deconstruction. And tell us about your new channel as well.
I would love to. It's good to see you. So I have two things kind of going. We're starting the Awakening Expansion YouTube channel. There should be a post on that this week. That's where Shelby and I, who was my healer, inner child healing, we're talking all things healing, spiritual guide, growth, shedding all of our programming, inner child healing, really just getting to that higher level of consciousness and really expanding from within and understanding kind of how to do that, and kind of going through some of the taboos of all of this self-help improvement stuff. Like the trick is not that. The trick is to just love all of your parts. And a good analogy I found from another healer was, like, think about it like piano keys, right? Like, all of your parts are piano keys, and it's not like you get rid of those keys. You're just able to expand to higher and lower octaves and make beautiful harmony with those keys. You don't want to get rid of them. You can kind of just incorporate them differently as you expand, which I think is really, really powerful, because for the longest time I struggled with hating certain parts and wanting to just get rid of them. But the second I just loved them and could see where they're coming from, that's when you get more keys and you can go higher and lower octaves and make beautiful harmony. And
I
then,
love that analogy.
right, yeah, it's really good. She's a healer. Her name is the Yeshwana, Yeshuana, and she is fabulous. She is a genius. Everything that comes out of your mouth, I'm like, you are an ascended alien being. You have all the answers. Everything she says just resonates. And but I'm also doing starting an Instagram page. It's called _awakened past tense _narcissist, and that's where I kind of talk about being a healing narcissist. So that's going to be on Instagram. We got more things, maybe another YouTube channel, but we're just kind of getting this all rolling, and it's so fun. And I just think we all have so much good information, and now with the way things go, we can all have a little business, and we can all tell our stories, and someone will be affected by that,
Yeah,
just like you
I
have.
love it. Yeah, I love it. I think more people telling their stories, talking about their experiences, the more the better. And I know that a lot of people are coming to YouTube to learn new things and to gain more information. And I love that, because it's sort of like a living library, and I think it's, for me anyway, it's turning into that kind of a space. And I guess, my algorithm is curated that way on purpose. But I love being a part of this space, and I'm glad to have you joining it as well. I think you have so much important information to share, and I just can't wait to see what you guys do. It's going to be great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here. I love our conversations. And yeah, like back when I was struggling through addiction and stuff, like honestly, what saved me a lot of times was just going to YouTube and finding, like, I literally, a couple of times I remember I was like, I need help. And sure enough, like, out popped 40 videos that were really, really helpful. And I think that that's where we're heading. That's where we are. And we're lucky to have it. And we're lucky to have all these people now that have a platform to share their experience in this life. And so we can all connect on some level.
Yeah, I agree. We have so much in common as human beings.
Yeah. And I believe so many things now are the joy we seek, the connection we seek is universal. Thank you. Yeah, it's universal. And I think we're uncovering that, getting away from politics and all of that, and understanding where we have common ground. And I think that will spur a lot of joy, purpose, and kind of taking consciousness to the next level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I often have this conversation that, when we remove all the labels from ourselves and we get rid of the cultural and political and religious ideals, we really are just all the same human beings. We're all looking for love and belonging and connection and prosperity and peace and joy. And the more we can focus on that instead of focusing on our differences, the better the whole world is going to be.
I agree completely.
So this is our third interview so far.
Sorry,
um,
everyone, for the long-windedness.
no, I love it, and I think the viewers are loving it too. We're getting some really positive things from listening to your experiences. So this is part 2 of emotional manipulation in the LDS mission. Last time we focused on the MTC and some of the training you received before you went out. And I know that you had some unique experiences because you were in leadership as a missionary. So, where would you like to start?
Yeah, I think I thought about that, and I think it starts with before I was called to that, and kind of just the dangers of such a hierarchical structure. And we didn't get into it so much when we were our first YouTube video, where male narcissism is more prevalent because of the dangers of the leadership positions within the church, and didn't really get into discussing maybe why that is outside of just presenting a mask for everyone at church, but then also being able to use emotional manipulation and spirituality to get those callings. And that happened with me on my mission. So to kind of, for those that don't understand about a mission, it's built up in a structure where the following, when you first hit a mission, you're a junior companion. So a junior companion, you start off fresh, green. You're with a companion who is called your trainer, and he's been out longer, he or she's been out longer than you, obviously. And then you work your way up to eventually, hopefully, be a trainer. And then you can become a district leader, where you're kind of in charge of 15 to 16 to 20 missionaries. And then you can work your way up to a zone leader, where that's several districts that you're in charge of. And then the top of that is you are an assistant to the president. And that is where you're in charge of, along with the mission president, you're over all of those missionaries. Okay. And so when I got to my mission, we were immediately told, like, it became clear that our mission president who was there only had 1 year left of his term. And that's important because mission presidents serve for 3 years. And one thing I don't think it's talked about enough is when you get a new mission president mid-mission, it's a big deal, and it changes everything. It's like getting a new CEO.
Yeah, because their leadership styles can be so different. They have a lot of control over what rules are enforced and how they're enforced. And it's sort of like I've
Mhm.
talked about, Bishop roulette so often, and stake
Exactly.
president roulette, and there's mission president roulette. So, different Mormons, and we talked about this in your first interview, how there's a million different versions of keeping the Sabbath day holy. And you sort of, pick and choose what commandments you're going to follow and how you're going to follow them. So
Mhm.
individual mission presidents have a great deal of influence over the tone of the mission. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes about when David Bednar took over at BYU Idaho and really ratcheted down on a lot of the rules and things like that. You couldn't wear flip-flops anymore. You couldn't wear, shorts above the knee anymore. There was a lot of rewriting of rules. So that happens on missions too. And
Yes.
my daughter definitely experienced that. She had night and day two different mission presidents.
Same. And really, you can ask any mission, whether you had a good or bad mission is really dependent on your mission president, because how they govern, how they rule, they have complete authority, and they have certain guidelines, of course, much like bishops, but you could have a completely different mission experience from one mission president to the next, outside of like the core rules and the schedule and stuff. But I mean,
Right.
it's really like getting an entire new management team for your business,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
My niece is serving a mission right now, and my sister and brother-in-law refer to him as Santa Claus because it's kind of a free for all. And I'm actually relieved to hear that, because I know that, like, the
good.
very, very strict mission presidents, it can be really damaging for young people to be treated so harshly at a time when they're very vulnerable.
Yes. Yeah. So when I got there, it became clear, and this is something I wasn't taught before, because our mission president at the time, he was a very older gentleman, kind of old school, but just really kind, nice, but didn't really go that deep. And so your mission president's really important when you first get there. He's like your dad. He's like your lifeline, and everyone looks up to them. At least in my mission. But the people who had been on the mission longer were like, oh, we're going to be so sad when he leaves. And at that time, when I got to the mission, it was like 10 to 11 months later, his term was going to be up. So I had that in the back of my mind, right? So where I wanted to go with this is the dangers of the hierarchy and the leadership positions, and the dangers that we learn growing up of external validation and getting that recognition that we want. And I hook, line, and sinker right into that. And maybe because I had more narcissistic tendencies or whatever, but that became really important to me. I wanted to kick it in the teeth, and do my best. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I recognized. So when you're first in a mission, there's not much, you want to do a good job. But traditionally in our mission, you get called, you could be a trainer at like 6 to 8 to 9 months. And then you could get called to be a district leader at like a year. And then a zone leader at, maybe 4 to 5, 6 months later. And then typically the assistants in our mission were called at 18 to 20 months, maybe even 22 months. And they would serve as an assistant for 3 months. And then their last 6 weeks on the mission, they would go back out into the field. And that was kind of how it worked. And so from caring about external validation and leadership roles, I immediately locked into that. And I say this all just trying to admit it. And I'm not saying all missionaries do this, but the upbringing does kind of foster that. Getting recognition.
Yeah, and I think I remember being told, we're not supposed to aspire to leadership positions, but it's sort of part of the culture. It really is. Of course, the leadership is seen as, the most righteous and everything. And if you're trying to prove your worth, as we always were in the church, that's a good way to prove your worth. If you're in a leadership position, then that means you must be doing something right. A lot of something's right.
Yes, absolutely. And so I was trying to do that. I was trying to be the best, new missionary they had ever seen. And I worked my butt off, and to the point where my trainer was like, I judged the living hell out of him for being lazy or whatever. And he was a good trainer. He really was. But my level of expectation and need to just be the best were a little bit delusional. And so I remember specifically at six months, a missionary who I was in the MTC with, who was on the same mission but serving in a different area, I got word that he got called to be a trainer and a district leader at like 6 months or 7.5 months. And instead of being happy for this guy, who's a sweet kid, but I was devastated. I mean, way more devastated than I should have been. But that's the culture of the church, because I was trying to fast track my way to being at the top and getting noticed, because I needed that external validation that I had learned, instead of just being devoted to God and loving all of that. So I'm not saying that all missionaries were like that. I know that just my dynamic growing up, it produced a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And I thought that. And I was devastated and I was depressed. And because I didn't get called to be anything. And I even remember because you get to meet with the mission president like once every 3 months, once every 6 weeks, maybe even if that. And I remember that first time, I'm trying to have him remember me. I'm trying to, in that interview, prove myself like I'm going to be a big deal here,
Yeah, hundreds of missionaries, right? And so you're trying to do you remember how many missionaries there were in your
Yes,
mission?
I think on the last episode I said 150, but we were at 130.
Okay. Yeah, so out of 130 missionaries, you're trying to be remembered as someone who is responsible and rule follower and capable and everything, so that you can,
Yeah.
get that leadership position.
and you have, a 10-minute interview with them, and I was like, I'm going to make the most of this. And that's kind of, I didn't even realize it at the time, but now, as we always say, you can piece together, there's a little emotional manipulation on my part there too. And so then I would even, you know, uh, communicate to my companions and people in my district that I was sad that I didn't get called to anything because I'm working my butt off, and so I'm like lobbying, which is ridiculous. And I have to give myself some grace for that. And they were like,
Yeah.
dude, like, and so I think they literally told, my district leader then told his own leader. And then that next transfer cycle, which you go in transfer cycles, and that's every 6 weeks. And every 6 weeks you could be transferred, you could get a new companion. It's all up to the mission president and the assistants of how to manage the mission. And in our mission, the longest you would stay in an area was about 6 months. So I had been in that first area for 6 months, and then I was called finally to be a trainer and to go to a new area. And so I was like, okay, all right, I got some validation, and I got partnered up with this sweet kid from Brazil who didn't speak a lick of English, and he just spoke Portuguese, and his English was very, very limited. So it was fun, and I felt honored to like be able to be a big brother to him and help him with the language and stuff. So we were out in Podunk, Florida, in the country for 6 months. But leading up to that, right, we had the new mission president come in. And so we go to zone conference, and it's like introduced. And I'm not going to use his name because I truly do love this man. And he taught me a lot of amazing things, and he was like a father to me. And he was a convert to the church. He didn't join until his mid-20s or maybe even early 30s with his wife.
Wow.
And I'm realizing now, like, that gave him such a unique perspective where he was not in the bubble all growing up, and he
Yeah.
was able to come in with this fresh look, this fresh perspective. And so I remember meeting him, and he's a powerful guy. First lesson he was talked about how he was a boxer, and he's in these, and I love fashion, he's in these gorgeous suits that are like, $5,000 suits, and I'm just like,
Wow.
this is my guy. This guy, he's got it. And he's a very powerful storyteller. His conversion story was powerful, and keep in mind, the previous mission president, when we get together, he didn't do any of that. He would just get up at zone conferences and talk deep doctrine. We would all love it, and he would just go really deep into Adam, God, all this crazy stuff, and we just ate it up because that's just how he ran it. And
Yeah.
he just wanted to keep the peace and keep the mission running. He didn't really participate. He just kind of, did what he needed to do. And he was an old guy, and his wife was really, really sweet. And so that was kind of the vibe. But he also had this system of hierarchy that everyone expected. And so the new mission president comes in, and I was just blown away by him. He's a powerful businessman out of California, made a ton of money in commercial real estate. And he's wearing some sweet ass suits and like $800 Italian shoes. And I was just like, this guy's like, I was so impressed by him. And so it comes to that point where I'm still in Podunk with my little Brazilian companion it's his time to cycle through all the missionaries and interview all of them. And during that time, I found out that my brother was getting a divorce back home, and he was leaving the church. That had happened within like 3 months of that first visit with the new mission president. And that was devastating as a
Wow.
missionary to
Yeah.
get those emails and know that one of your rocks that you looked up to was leaving the church, and he was getting a divorce. His wife cheated on him. And that was devastating on the mission. That was truly devastating. And I think that might have been the first time in the back of my mind, I was like, wait a minute. I trusted him with everything, and he thinks it's not true. So I think
Mm.
that was the first piece of doubt. So
Yeah.
I'm going in to talk to the new mission president one-on-one, and subconsciously, consciously, I was like, I'm going to make him remember me. And, he asked how I was doing, and I told him that story, and I got choked up and I cried. And it was a special moment with him because he was a big businessman, but he had a big heart, and he was truly a good man. And then didn't think much of it. And then 6 weeks later, it's time for transfers, like a week before transfers. And I get a call from him at my apartment. And he's like, Elder, I'd like to call you to be my assistant. And I was not expecting that, but instantly I'm like shocked and speechless. But instantly it was just like, oh my gosh. And it felt really, really good because that's the most external validation you can get on the mission. And
Yeah.
no one had been called. I mean, I hadn't even been out a year.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, this
You're
is
like,
insane.
"It's happening. It's happening."
It's happening. I did it. We made it. And I still have a year left on my mission, so but looking back, I manipulated him. I he saw something in me where he thought, okay, this kid can reach these other missionaries. He's got some depth, he's got some passion, he's got some emotionality, and he, well spoken, whatever. And then I was the assistant for that next year. He didn't ever remove me and have me go
Yeah.
back into the field. And I had 3 or 4 companions as an assistant that I stayed. They came in as an assistant. We called another assistant, and I stayed that entire time being his
Yeah.
assistant. So
Well, I just wanna pause for 1 second and just give young missionary you a little bit of grace because, I know that part of what we're doing here is, like, looking back and saying, "That probably wasn't the healthiest way to handle that," right? But, you were in a moment where you really were emotionally devastated by what was going on with your brother,
mhm,
and so it's not like you made up a story. It's not like you manufactured emotion. You really were feeling that. So I just want to give you that much grace, because
okay,
that it's a real thing. And I think that we are trained in the Mormon church to use emotion to not only convert ourselves but other people as well. When we get up and bear our testimony, we're encouraged to use our devastating experiences, our heartbreaks, our losses to demonstrate our faith and to help other people have a faithful story that they've heard as well. So it's like almost every, and I call it open mic Sunday now, where once a month, members get up in the congregation and tell stories of their faith. And as much as the leadership tries to narrow it down to like, please keep your testimony brief and please stick to, these 5 things, which is like the Savior, the restored gospel, Joseph Smith, the current prophet. I forget what the 5 things are, but like keep it in this area, right? No matter how much they do that, people go off on wild,
good.
crazy stories. And maybe we'll do an episode one time where we just do crazy open mic stories because I heard some wild stuff in testimony meeting that should never have been said from the pulpit, right? But that's, once a month, we're encouraged to bear our testimony as often as we can. And I was definitely one of those that was like, I felt guilty if I didn't get up every month and share some experience because I was always going through something difficult and then gaslighting myself into saying, but my faith is strong. I believe God is with me, XYZ faith promoting story. So all of that just to say you came by it so honestly, and that's the whole conversation we're having, is that the church taught us how to do this, and we didn't realize at the time that it wasn't healthy. We didn't realize it wasn't authentic. We thought it was. We thought we were being the most vulnerable, authentic version of ourselves. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And with that, it just popped into my head. Those testimony meetings, like, you're just trying to be heard sometimes, and the
Yeah.
church really silences you, and I think I went through that growing up. Like times you just want to be heard, and I think maybe that venting session that some people have at the testimony meeting, and then they, twist it down to relate it to a testimony, instead of just a venting session. There might be something to that. But yeah, I did that, and it was a dream come true, because I knew everyone in that mission was going to be like, "What? He's been out how long?" And I thrived on that. But I also thought, I was like, the Spirit confirmed to him, man, like, we're going to do great things. This is going to be great. This is going to be fun. And so he started immediately. And this guy was a brilliant businessman. He was a brilliant alpha male, not in the toxic masculinity sense for a guy of his age. But we started right away, and he immediately had me and my current companion, who he did not choose, who was already the assistant. And there was already, rumblings from him that he was not happy about it, because he had this other guy lined up. And I feel bad for the other missionary who was done everything he was supposed to do, and he was his own leader, and it was his time to be assistant, and they called me instead. And so there was rumblings going throughout that, and I think my mission president kind of knew that, and that it would be controversial. So he had us go out to every district, and me and my current companion at the time, to talk to them. We use it as an excuse. We got to show this, safety video for driving in the rain in Florida. But then, kind of, he wanted to show, like, this is my new general, and this is how it's going to be. And so, I mean, from a business perspective, he ran that mission like a business, and he knew exactly how to get the results. I mean, down to, we had, KPIs, obviously the church does, key performance indicators. And we figured out, if this went up, baptisms would go up. If this went down, this would happen. This went down. And so I learned so much from him. And I will say, he did have the compassion, spiritual side of it. He was just a powerhouse, and I learned so much from him. So before we get into that, right as I was called, we were going to get a visit from a member of the Quorum of the 70, because periodic throughout your mission, you're going to get visited. And I think this was normal, and I didn't know that. But it was Greg C. Christensen, and he was a football player at BYU, married his wife, Debbie, right after his mission. And then he ran several car dealerships, management companies. He got his MBA out of California. And he was a good businessman and loyal to the church. And he was called to be a mission president at age 39. I looked all this up. And so he came to the
That's pretty
mission.
young.
Yeah. And then to the Quorum of the 70 when he was, 6 years later, back in 2002. And so he came to the mission. And when that happens, he comes to the mission president's house, and it's us, me and my other companion, who was still from the old regime. And, we have dinner with them. He's going to address the entire mission the next day, and he's there. And so we had very intimate dinner with him, and several hours of talking. And then he's like, all right, Elder so-and-so and Elder so-and-so, if you would join me in the other room. And then, and the mission president. And so what happened next was kind of bizarre. He grilled my companion and me about the mission. And keep in mind, I've been an assistant for like 2 weeks. And so, and he's asking, basically, do the missionaries respect this new mission president? Does he have control of this mission?
Wow.
Will these missionaries listen to him? And I'm like, oh crap, because I did believe in him, and I was honest. I was like, there's people who still like the old regime, and because my and I keep wanting to say his name, but I don't want to do that, because I just respect for him. he was ruffling feathers, and he was ready to get this thing as a baptizing mission. And the old mission president didn't do that. He was just like, serve your 2 years, don't go home early, do your best, and let's talk about some deep doctrine. Well, the new mission president was like, we're going to turn this into a machine, and we're not going to stop. And obviously that rubbed some missionaries the wrong way, but I was full team him. I worshiped him. And I was just like, if he hasn't gotten the respect yet, he will get it instantly. I was like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I'm talking to this, member of the 70 while my mission president is sitting right there during this. So
Whoa, that's really putting you on the spot.
yeah, it was very intense. And so it can kind of just show you the intricacies in the system that the church is, and they're making sure everything, you're checking all the boxes, right?
Now, okay, can you answer this question for me? Because I've never, like, people have explained this to me and I've never gotten a satisfactory answer. What in the world is the Quorum of the 70? Like, I know it's leadership. I know it. Like, these are the dudes who sit on the stand during general conference. They all get their stipend. They all get their living allowance and whatever, I know that they go around and visit, and just like you're saying, they check in with the leadership. How are things working? But I cannot for the life of me figure out, like, what's the point of that quorum? Like, okay, intellectually understand it, but like in the hierarchy of the church, it's like bishop, stake president, area president, right? Are the area presidents part of the Quorum of the 70? Why is it called the Quorum of the 70? There aren't 70 of them. I just could never make this make sense in my brain.
Man, at one time I did. So I was kind of just Googling him and seeing the history. So it appears that, because obviously you have bishops, stake presidents in what you said, high councilman area. It said he was in charge of a certain area. So I think it's just the uppers in the localness report to him, because he was always like, from this time to this time, he served the Salt Lake City, Utah Valley area. And I think they keep tabs, visit occasionally, meet with the leadership, making sure, maybe communicating from the even the Quorum of the 12 of things that are coming and what they're focusing on. But I think it's just a glorified go visit different churches each week. And but in terms of like the meetings that the Quorum of the 70 have, I don't know. I think we've got to do some research and figure that out, so I don't feel like under informed on that. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. But every time they mentioned it, he was in charge of an area. And I
Yeah.
have to assume those are, areas, stakes, and then he communicates, bringing the information down the line, just like
Yeah.
leadership hierarchy.
Yeah. Like, they get their marching orders from the 15 who are in charge. And then, they sort of bring that message to wherever they're visiting and say, this is what the 15 are telling us you need to focus on or fix or change or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think it's sort of like in the Catholic Church where they have cardinals over certain areas or whatever. It really is a machine. It really is a corporation. It
Mhm.
functions exactly the same way. I just never understood, I guess, why they called it the 70. I think originally there were seven. I don't know. It was one of those things that when I left Mormonism, I was like, well, there's something I never have to figure out or worry about. And here we are talking about it.
Right. So, yeah, they are for sure paid.
Oh,
They're on
yeah.
the payroll. They get a car. They get a free car. They're in the paid realm, right? Whereas like stake presidents, high councilmen, area presidents, they're not. These guys are. So overseeing global church administration, the world is divided into areas, and members of the Quorum of the 70 are assigned to preside over different areas of the church. They ensure church policies, handbooks, and leadership guidelines are followed. They report to the Quorum of the 12 apostles. Public relations and outreach. They speak at conferences. He's given talks in general conference. Church discipline and authority, mission oversight and direction, and supervising local leaders. There's the first and second quorum. These are high-ranking members. They often serve until retirement age at the age of 70 and have significant influence in church government. Area 70s, these leaders are not general authorities, but serve regionally. Key takeaway, Quorum of the 70 acts as the enforcers of the system, ensuring that directives from the first presidency and the 12 apostles are implemented without question. They provide oversight, discipline, and administrative control while keeping lower level leaders, stake presidents, bishops, and mission presidents in line. So there we go.
Wow, that's some telling language. I mean, even from AI, to sort of
Yeah.
glean that they're the enforcers. They're there to keep people in line. And so just so that people understand too, especially those who've never been Mormon, the way that you get to be called as a bishop, this blew my mind when I found this out, that the stake presidency gets together and they look at the tithing records and they
Exactly.
see who's paying
Top
the
five.
most tithing. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the top 5 dudes, and then I guess they pray about it and get inspiration as to, which of those 5 dudes is going to be the best to be the bishop. And then stake president's kind of the same thing, right? It's like, have they served in leadership before? Have they been a bishop? They usually go from being on bishop to being on the stake council. Is that what it's called? The stake council? For some reason, that doesn't sound right in my mind.
The High
It's like
Council?
the high council. There it is. Yeah, the high council, where it's like former bishops. There were 12 of them, and they would go around and visit the different wards and report back to the stake president what was happening in the different wards. So if you've served as a bishop and you've been on the high council, then you're eligible for stake president. Stake president gets chosen much the same way. It's like if you meet those 2 qualifications and you're paying lots of tithing, you can be a stake president. Then once you've served as a stake president, you're eligible for like mission president or, area authority or whatever. But it really is just a big bunch of cronies.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
who do you know? Who would you recommend? Whose names have been out there, that kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a led by the Spirit thing. It's literally at the bishop level. It's top 5 tithe payers. Let's pick one. And then stake president. I know this because my mission president explained how his stake presidency interview, and there was like 10 or 15 of them called in. And then at the end, they ask, give us 3 to 5 other names who we should be considering for this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's telling.
Yes. Yes, it is. So,
Wow.
so he came, and so we had that thing. But like, I'm going to comment on the experience we had with Greg and Debbie at dinner. And so she shows up, and I've thought about this a lot because I'm like, well, John, you're trying to be a healer now. We don't want to be talking about people, but I feel like this is punching up, and you always want to be punching up. I don't want to punch and be arguing with other Mormons. I want to punch the system, and I want to punch the leadership who's fostering all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like government. Like, we shouldn't be attacking each other. We should be attacking the system and the leaders
Yeah.
of this, right? So
Systems, not people.
yeah, but once you're in the system and you don't do anything to change it, you're culpable, So she shows up, and bless her heart, her whole life from the day she married him has been in his shadow, right? He's
Yeah.
football player, and then just church calling after church calling, and she's just the wife. And I don't know what her hopes and dreams are, but I'm sure she had them, and she wasn't able to do that. So now I'm able to look at it with a lot more compassion. But she was dripping in diamonds, jewelry, and she was in a very nice, I still remember it, blue skirt, suit, just hair perfectly. Everything was perfect. And she was just very like, and she would make like backhanded comments to the mission president's wife about the decorations and the dinner. And even I was taken aback, and I looked over at the mission president's wife, and I was just like, okay. And
Wow.
just very kind of judgy, and just miserable. And I can imagine
Mm.
that would not be a fun life, to just follow your husband around and doing all this church BS, you know? So there was that part of it. And then Greg was okay, you know, he was stern. He wasn't that much of a talker. He did brag about the car dealerships he owned, and that he could get my mission president a cooler car. And, you know, she did brag about the money they had and all of her jewels and
Which
what they costs,
that's
right?
what a mission president needs, is a cooler car.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And so I'm fresh. I have just gotten the apex leadership role that I've been dreaming of, and I'm sitting there with like the higher ups, expecting to see Jesus, you know, and have a great religious experience, which is
Oh,
unfair. And
yeah.
I'm just like, these aren't even great people. Like, it was a very surreal moment, and I'm looking across it because I had already connected with my mission president's wife and my mission president. Like, I'm able to do that through the
Mm,
skills that I've learned. And we're kind of looking at each other, like giving each other the look, like we're already gossiping just by looking
mm,
at this. And it was just, and then they left, and we gossiped for an hour about them. And then he
mm.
went up and spoke to all of our missionaries the next day. So that was just a very telling thing. And I think we even said, like, they're not very Christ-like, you know? Like,
Hmm.
she was just bragging about the money, bragging about the jewelry, showing up and just dripping. And I think she even made a comment, like, in Salt Lake, she can't wear all that much. And, you know, so when she gets out of there, she wants to show it off. And I'm like, you know what?
Wow.
You go, girl. Do your thing. You know, flaunt that jewelry. Do whatever you got to
Yeah,
do. Your life does not sound fun. Obviously, at the time, I did not think that. I was just like,
yeah.
huh, okay, so this is how the church is run. This is interesting. And I'm logging all of this. And I'm like, so basically, they called a used car salesman. Now, that's unfair. I mean, he played football at BYU 4 years, served a mission in Chile, became a mission president at 38, and then at 46 became a general authority. And I was just like, honestly, very disappointed,
Yeah,
because I honestly thought, I was just like, our mission president kills this guy. Like, we need more
yeah,
men like my mission president in there. And I would say that a
yeah.
lot. And they would never do that because he was too not like that. He was, I don't know, real. It's hard to
Mm.
explain, but I remember that firsthand, just being like, that was an odd experience.
Yeah, and it's so disappointing, as a young idealistic missionary. I can just imagine, you're expecting, and I had this expectation too, that you're expecting that the higher up you get in leadership in the church, maybe the more humble, maybe the more Christ-like, and the more kind, the more loving. The church that I wanted to believe in, that was it. It was like you're getting more Christ-like and more humble as you sort of go up in leadership. And who we want leading the church is people
Yeah.
who are who are emulating, exemplifying the traits of Jesus Christ, kindness, compassion, love, long suffering, humility. And that to me was the big thing. I had a similar disappointing experience, meeting David Bednar.
Well, wow.
Although, I have to say I was way too Mormon at the time to be disappointed by it, but
Of
I
course.
just noted it. I just noted it. And so he came to San Antonio to speak. Of course, it was a huge deal. We hadn't had an apostle there in, a really long time. And um, he came to speak at our state conference, or we had like a special meeting that was just, we called just because he was there. We had the meeting, of course, like it was very inspirational. I can talk about what he talked about some other time, but just to say that when the meeting was over, of course, everybody wants to go shake his hand. And so he's up there on the stand, and people are lining up to go up there and shake his hand. And there still is like organ music softly playing. It's still a sort of a reverent environment. There's like a low rumble of whispering going on. And at one point he just stopped talking to whoever he was talking to, and he went up to the podium and he said, "Brothers and sisters, when the spirit leaves, so must I." And it wasn't like a gentle sort of a rebuke. It was like, "Shut up." That was the tone of voice that he was using to tell us that we were getting too loud inside the chapel. And I
Yeah.
just remember thinking, what? Did an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ just tell us to shut up, basically? I mean, it was stern. It was not kind in any way. So I didn't, it didn't like, I guess it didn't really ruffle my feathers enough at the time that I was like, what's wrong with this guy? But it was sort of just this like little dissonant tone of like, is this guy really, does he really represent Jesus Christ? You know,
Yeah.
it's those little moments.
His mask came off for a little bit, and you see that, and it's
Yeah.
like jarring. It's like, whoa,
That's a
what is
great
that?
way to put it, like, the mask slipped just for a second,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
was like I didn't realize it was a mask at the time, but
No.
now, whenever I see him recordings of him speaking anywhere, it's so obvious to me now, being out of the church and having learned about narcissistic abuse, having learned that that's what I went through, being able to spot narcissistic behavior now, I can't unsee it. So every time I see him speak or interact with people, I can see it in his face. I can see it in his body language. I can hear it in the tone of his voice. It's so easy for me to detect now, and that's one of the reasons why we're having these conversations, because I want other people to be able to see it for what it is as well.
Yeah. Like these are just men that have no special anything, and they're raised in Salt Lake and in the church, and they have deep narcissistic tendencies. They don't take accountability, and you are going to see their mask come off. And we're seeing that a lot with Bednar. I mean, Reddit's having a field day with him, and then some other gal, famous ex-Mormon influencer, was reading off all these experiences with Bednar, and it's just like, that's who he really is, bottom line. And it's
Yeah,
too bad.
not only are these men not Christ-like, they're not even good men, a lot of them.
No, no. I mean, I just there was it's just sad. So yeah, that was my first experience with a major church person,
Yeah.
and I was underwhelmed, and it was very quick for us all to kind of just scratch our heads and be like, were we all here for that? Did that just happen? The energy felt weird. It it was not a great feeling, and that kind of makes you think, well, these guys are running this church. But as you were, I was far too Mormon at the time to really take that in. I could see that now, right? But it was just like, all right, well, he's gone, let's get back to work, come on.
Yeah.
And so that I wanted to talk about that, because that's how all these guys are. And I'm sure some of them are good men, but I remember later on in my mission, as I had been with my mission president, seeing his genius, seeing his um, I knew he would never be called higher up, because I saw how he spoke from the pulpit and I saw how they spoke from the pulpit, and they were two very different things. Their BS general conference talks don't do anything. I mean, every time my mission president spoke, it was like, everyone is listening. We are excited. He's going to give us some really good advice. He's going to get us all ready to run through a brick wall. And Salt Lake wouldn't like that, honestly. He wouldn't fit in.
Mhm.
And during my tenure as an assistant, I could see that. And I was honestly kind of sad about it. And I think I talked to him about it. And he was like, oh, they'll never call me to that. Because I think he knew too, which is very interesting. I mean, you're talking about
Hmm.
a guy who got our mission up and ran, ran it like a business, and was there for his missionaries. And he was not perfect, and sometimes he ran it too much like a business, but we were really successful doing that, very successful doing that. And that's how the church runs. It's a business.
Yeah. Yeah. So he came in, he sort of implemented some new policies. You guys started, keeping track of different metrics, and um, you started to see an increase in baptisms and that. So can you talk a little bit about what he changed and why that led to more baptisms, and maybe what the other missionaries, what their reactions were to these new policies and some of that?
Yes, absolutely. So, very quickly, you could understand, like, if we had a meeting with him, and we met with him a lot in the beginning, as you can imagine, he had thought about this stuff like all night, and he used his business acumen to figure it out. And one of the first things he did was just a simple, like, okay, when we have more um, discussions with members, those people typically have a higher likelihood of getting baptized. So that was just like a low hanging fruit that he said that we could try to implement, right? But
So
he,
you're talking about missionaries teaching somebody when there's a member present, like the member invites someone and the missionaries teach them. Yeah, that makes total sense.
yeah, it's basically like you got a referral right there, and you have someone. It's a lot less. Yeah, it's just a better situation for everyone, and those people had a higher likelihood of getting baptized. So I think that was one of the first things he started. And then the next number we focused on was, so we implemented that, and he had us go talk to the mission a lot. And um, as an assistant, we're talking to the zone leaders every week, going through numbers. They get all their numbers from the district leaders. So the numbers are like, how many discussions did you have? How many new investigators did your district have? How many lessons did you teach with a member present? How many baptisms do you have? How many baptismal invitations do you have? And those nights, I mean, we would be up till midnight, 2 a.m., inputting all this data because he cared about the data big time,
Mm, yeah.
to see how we did. And it got to a point where, the zone leaders, because he invoked such belief and power that we're going to be the best mission out there. And that rubbed a lot of the people the wrong way, but they eventually got in line, because if you didn't, he was not that nice to you. And you
Mm,
wanted to be in his favor because he just had that effect. I mean, this guy could have started a
yeah.
cult. I'm not even kidding. So,
Well,
um,
this is making me think a little bit about, I don't know if you saw Jurassic World. It's, I don't know, the fourth or fifth Jurassic Park, where the guy who owns everything comes to visit the park, and the lady running it is giving all the numbers, like our sales have increased this percent and we're up blah 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 blah. And he says, are the animals happy? And she looks at him and she's like, what do you mean? He's like, are they enjoying life? Are they happy? Do you see it in their eyes? Are they, and this is what strikes me about the mission. It's like, you're supposed to be spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is supposed to be the most life altering message that you're sharing with these people, and it's supposed to change their lives. They're supposed to come to Christ and be transformed, and arguably have a better quality of life, have better spirituality, have better relationships. And it's like, the numbers are so important. Did anybody think to ask, are the missionaries happy? Are they enjoying the teaching? Are they thriving? Are their testimonies growing? Are they feeling peaceful? I doubt very much that anybody asked those sorts of questions about, like, your mental health, about your spiritual health.
no, and that's where I can, you know, he did have some faults, obviously, because there wasn't a ton of that. There really wasn't, and he just tried to maximize, combinations of missionaries. Like every time we would get together to go over the transfers, like who are we going to move, where are we going to put people, and he was really big into that. He had us make little, about this big. Everyone had a picture, their picture magnet, and their name, and we put it up on a whiteboard like we were calling a football play. And in the beginning, we really poured over that for 3 to 4 hours of like who we thought could be good together. If this is a weak missionary who's struggling with this, who could help him with that, and be really productive and get stronger in the faith. So there was that, but in terms of like, how are our missionaries doing? He was a little bit more business minded.
Mhm.
Not a tyrant at all, but he was just so good. Every decision he made, I was just like, that is brilliant. And he got everyone on board pretty quickly. And if you were not on board, you were kind of judged,
Mm.
honestly, by the missionaries, by me. Um, and he did a lot of that, and he used me to kind of get out there and maybe be the emotional support sometimes, but really getting all of these missionaries to a point where they believed they could do anything. And I remember we later in the mission, we went and we did a training where just me and it was another assistant at the time, and he was like, I need you guys to go everywhere and inspire. And we had like a 2-hour meeting, and those meetings honestly were insane. Like, we got to a point where we just talked about belief and scriptures about belief and what is possible if you have perfect belief. And from those meetings, they were like gigged up sales meetings, right? Like door-to-door sales, selling Vivint, and those guys are just like pumping. We're going to sell 1,000 new alarm systems today. But we were using the spirit and motivation to be like, all right, guys, with that, what do you think is possible? And we would
Mm.
then have them set goals, and they set insane goals. I remember one crazy kid who ended up being my companion assistant. They were like, we can teach 200 lessons this week. And we were like, hell yeah, which is just
Whoa.
insane. Yeah.
That's
And so they,
crazy.
yeah. And so like it was a motivating kind of inspo type thing. And that was all mission president, but we believed it. And then it was like, how many new investigators can we get? And that was a big metric, was like, all right, we need, and I remember he said this, the mission president, if we have a bigger net and we catch more fish, we got to have a bigger net. And that was trying to get new investigators, because we saw if new investigators went up, everything else kind of went up. And so we focused
Right.
on several transfers of just get new investigators. Like, you better get 5 to 10 this week. And if the zone leaders talked to me and called with disappointing numbers, they were like scared and apologetic.
Mm.
And then, president calls, he's like, tell me the numbers. Let's go through it. And it was just like a business, but it was effective.
Yeah. I just want to clarify for those who are not Mormon, never been Mormon. Investigator is the designation that missionaries give anybody who is talking to the missionaries. So even if you're not really that interested, if the missionaries are spending time with you, you're an investigator. And can you talk about sort of like the book that gets where people's interactions get recorded? Because I want people out there to know, like, if you have a conversation with a missionary, your name is in a book somewhere.
Yeah, it's getting documented for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That was another thing, was record keeping. So you knew you could keep tabs on everyone. So yeah, I forget what the book was called, but yeah, you write down.
The
And
area
so like,
book, I think.
yeah, thank you. So if I'm like, when I first got called to be a trainer with my little Brazilian companion, we went to a new area that, normally you have a missionary who's been there. We had never been to this area. I had never been. The sister missionaries had been in that area, and they decided to change it to elders. So I go in fresh. What do? Well, you open that book up, right? And you see everything, everyone who's less active, who they visit, everywhere they track, every investigator they have talked to, you are in that book forever, until you say don't ever come back. And even then, we probably voided that boundary and tried. There's many a times where people were just like, nah, man, I'm not feeling it, and we would go back and we would go back and we would go back, because we don't have boundaries, and we believe that our message is more important than their boundary.
Yeah, and I know that, when I was a ward missionary, I was heavily involved with, you know, helping the missionaries to get people to teach. And I know one of the things that they would do is they would even go knock on doors and say, "Oh, we're looking for so and so, that we taught a few years ago. Do they still live here?" And it would be like some, new person who never seen the missionaries before or whatever. Oh no, that person like moved out a few years ago or whatever. well, that they would use that as an in. Well, oh, okay, well, so and so moved away. Well, would you be interested in hearing? So it's not even just your name, but if the missionaries have ever visited someone at your address who was interested in the church, they're going to keep coming back to that address because it's in the book as a potential place to find someone to teach. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah, it blows my mind because I know my name is in the book. Being an ex-member, and I'm sure that they have notes about the last time they were here when I talked to them about the bite
They do.
bottle.
They do.
And I asked them if they were safe. I asked them if they felt safe to leave. I asked them if they had enough to eat, if they were feeling, validated and safe and all that. It's just a conversation about like, how are you doing? And that's what I do with missionaries now when they come around
Good.
is I ask them how they're doing. Do you need anything to eat or drink? If you need a safe place to vent or you're having a hard time, this is the place for you to come. I'm here for you. So I wonder if there is a book and then a book. Like, do they also keep track of places that might be like a safe place for missionaries who are struggling? I wonder.
No, no, we didn't have any of that. You kind of knew what members were cool, that they'd drive you places, or
Mhm.
they'd have you over to watch a movie. You knew who those people were,
Yeah.
uh, for sure. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping that what you provided to them is used more. Did you get any? Have you had any takers?
No, I mean, I even when I was in the church, I wanted to make it known that my house was a safe space. I was like, I told them every time they came by my house, I was like, if you are ever in need of anything, come here. I will feed you anytime, even if you just like need to take a lunch to go or something like that. Like if you don't have enough to eat that day or whatever, or if you need to write down that you gave a lesson or something, come to me. I'm happy to be here for whatever you need. And I think that, because my former spouse was an inactive member, he joined the church after we'd been married for about a year or so. And then he was only active for a few months. And so the missionaries were always coming around because we went through like probably 3 or 4 sets of missionaries before he got baptized. And then once he got baptized, they wanted to make sure he stayed active. So we had missionaries over all the time. I was always signing up to have missionaries over. And my oldest daughter was, she took it very seriously to share the gospel with her friends. And she had several of her friends get baptized. So we always had missionaries in our house. We were always, feeding the missionaries. I felt terrible if I wasn't on the calendar every month. I tried to make sure
Yeah,
I
it's
was
guilt.
feeding the missionaries every month.
Yeah.
But I also like really felt compassion for what they were going through and what they were doing. And I wanted to be that safe person. I would always ask them like, hey, can I text a picture to your mom, or can I let your mom know how you're doing? Because this was, back before they were allowed to contact their parents very often or whatever. I was like, come here on the
Mhm.
holidays, come here on your birthday, just wanted to make sure that I did that. And I still feel that way, but I know that there are probably some missionaries who won't come here because I'm an ex-member and because of what's in the book. Like she's not coming back, guys.
How does your daughter feel now that she's out about converting her friends?
We actually did it. I had her on. We did a long episode where we talked about her
Oh,
mission, and what she said was she thinks that her friends saw our family as something that a lot of them didn't have. It was like, even though dad wasn't coming to church, we had dinner together almost every night. And, there was a loving feeling in the home. And there was like that I cared about her friends very much. I wanted to know how they were doing. I wanted to make sure that they felt, safe and welcome in my home. I got to know them really well. A lot of her friends called me mama and used my last name. Um, and so it was very much this feeling of like, I think it was more just the sense of family and the sense of belonging for her friends, and she was happy that they, felt welcomed and loved and accepted. And it's really interesting, just that's the sort of community that my daughter had friends with. I think 3 of her friends were baptized while she was in high school, which is more than a lot of missionaries
That's
get on their
crazy.
mission.
That is crazy.
Um, and one of them came out as gay and is no longer in the church. One of them came out as trans and is no longer in the church. And another one of them is now non-binary and is not in the church. But I just think about, the, how beautiful it was to have such a strong connection and to be there for those kids at times when they maybe didn't have other adults that cared that much about them, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So
And
anyway.
yeah, I have no doubt you had so much empathy, and I'm sure they appreciated that so much. So well done. That's more than I did in high school. Golly, I was just trying to be cool, play football, drive a car around. I did not care. I really didn't.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Where were we? I
Anyway,
forgot.
so we were
I don't know
talking
if this is
about.
like, yeah, in my head, this sounded a lot better. I don't know if it's interesting for people to see
Oh,
what,
I'm sure. I'm sure it
yeah,
is. When, people see the missionaries out on the street. And of course, it's kind of like the Mormon icon, right? They are the billboard for the church. So you see the classic short sleeve white shirt, the classic black name tag, tie and everything, and you think Mormons, and it's a clean, wholesome image. And I think a lot of people see that as a billboard and don't consider the fact that they're real people. They're real young men and young women who are really trying hard to do their best to do what is expected of them, and to check the boxes that make them acceptable in their family system. And a lot of them have made, really big sacrifices to be out there, you know, doing this mission for the church. It's totally a social expectation, societal expectation. So I want people to understand more what that experience is like for the actual people who are going through it. And I think it does resonate with people. And I hope also that it creates a larger conversation around, like, when you see these guys on the street, don't slam the door in their face. You may not want to talk with them about the gospel, but just ask them if they're okay. Provide a meal for them, give them
yeah,
a bottle of water, be kind to them, because a lot of them didn't really choose to be there. There are a lot of missionaries who are those, like, religious zealots who will try to, like, Bible bash with you and whatever,
yes,
but they're just human beings who have been indoctrinated and brainwashed in the MTC, and they don't really understand that it's not a good look. They don't really understand that the message is sort of bigoted and harmful. They really think that they are saving souls out there. So anyway, I just hope that there's more compassion. I hope there's more compassionate treatment of LDS missionaries, because it always breaks my heart when I see a harmful, argumentative interaction between LDS missionaries and someone. I saw a TikTok just this morning, um, where a Black lady invited these 3 missionaries into her house and basically yelled at them because of the bigoted teachings of the church. And this poor elder was saying, "No, we just want to share a message with you." And she fought back, and she yelled back, and she was like, "But you're not going to tell me about the priesthood ban, and you're not going to tell me this, and you're not going to tell me that." And she's right.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, she's right. But I just think about that experience for those poor young guys, and they're already going through something that's so hard. So I
yeah.
just hope this conversation helps those
Well,
interactions.
that's a good point. And I get that, lady. I've when I see missionaries in the past, it's honestly, it triggers and it makes me angry, and I want to scream at them like this lady has. But you're being the more compassionate person here, and I still have some things I have to work on, because a lot of that is you're so angry that these people are still a part of that world that that you have worked so hard to get away from.
Yeah.
And it's some projection too, that you fell for it a little bit, maybe a little guilt trip too. But to that lady, to myself, it's not their fault. We need to be punching at the leadership, not these poor missionaries. you know and that's where I think punching up is always a good idea. But you're right, I'm going to have a lot more compassion for the little guys in ties and just make sure that they're okay. And because, as we said before, like, there's a lot more mental health stuff we're aware of now. And these missions, I am telling everyone, if you don't know, they are daunting, they are traumatizing, they are so hard, of just constantly trying to feel worthy enough, and while doing some very uncomfortable things of getting out of your comfort zone and talking to people and having to have the space to know that you're trying to save them for eternity. That is a big responsibility to put on an 18-year-old kid, that
Yes.
you need to do your best today. Otherwise, you know you could be the reason that they don't get to the highest degree of heaven. Like, that is, oh, no one should have to think that or do that, let alone when you're away from your family, isolated for 2 years at that age.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about the concept that if you are not perfectly obedient, then that's gonna be damaging for people out there in the field? I mean, you touched on it just a little bit just now, but I don't think people understand that that is an expectation, like, perfect obedience is an expectation, literally.
Yes, you follow every single rule. And if you don't, that's why you're not baptizing. That's why you're not happy. That's why you're struggling. So that is so toxic. So you're constantly like, maybe you are you're doing your absolute best, you're doing everything right, and yet you haven't found success and you're getting discouraged. Where do you think that's going to lead you to think that it's my fault? This is on me. I'm clearly doing something wrong that God doesn't like, or I'm not being obedient enough. So what do? You push harder. You try to get more strict, even with the already insanely strict rules. And it all relates to obedience. And obedience equals love. And obedience equals blessings. And if you're not getting those, then something's wrong with you. Not what's wrong with this system or this setup. There's something wrong with you. And you struggle
Right.
with that every day.
Yeah, and isn't the saying, "Obedience brings blessings, perfect obedience brings miracles," or something like that?
Yeah, and to a point where I even did it with our missionaries teaching. Like, if we truly had perfect obedience and belief, we could literally move mountains, because that's what the scripture says. And so that's just an unattainable fantasy. And but as a missionary, you're in it, and everyone's being spiritual, and you're all trying to do this together. And so you're trying to one up and just and then obviously with the external validation, those missionaries that are doing well get praised, and they get recognized, and you could be working twice as hard, and they just got lucky, but they're going to get the benefit. They're going to get to write, and they're preach my gospel that they baptized this person, or whatever, when really that shouldn't be what it's about. So yeah, the meritocracy of a mission is real, at least for us, because our mission president wanted results. He wanted to convert more people, and he really believed he wanted to convert more people. But he ran that mission into a very successful business that any consulting firm would go in and say, yeah, he did all the right things to get more results. Results being baptisms. Results being getting recognized from the higher ups that, holy cow, this mission baptized X amount last year, and they're on pace to hit this year, and then even more after that. So um, it's a lot of pressure, and it's never enough. It's never enough. You can always work harder. You could always pray harder. You could always study more. You could always track more. You could always have more faith in every second that you knock on that door. Like, oh, if they said no, you're left thinking, well, did I not have enough faith? And that can drain you.
Yeah, totally. And it strikes me that obviously, metrics are important, measuring results are important, but when there's a hyper focus on the number and the percentages and all of that, the human element gets left behind. There are people suffer, they fall through the cracks when we just focus on numbers only.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's kind of how the church runs it, even with
Yeah.
tithing. It to
Yeah.
me, I realized this morning, like that mission and how it was run, that's how the church is run. You know, they go off numbers, tithing, activity, all of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we discussed who's in charge, and they don't. How are we doing? How are the members doing? And maybe this last survey was an effort to do that, but it was more of like kind of what we said, like, how do you feel about this? Do you think this is a sin? Would you leave the church if we change this policy? So, and that human element on a mission for a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid is so crucial. But my mission president found a way to rally his troops and get us to be absolutely devoted to the cause. Honestly,
Yeah.
he
Do
was a
you
man.
happen to remember, what the numbers were like before and after he implemented all of these new policies and everything?
Yeah, approximately. So these are approximate. So I think a year before he got there, baptized like 200 to 300 people in the mission.
That seems like a lot.
I mean, right? Yeah, right.
I
That's
mean,
pretty good, right?
150 missionaries, that's two convert baptisms per missionary. That seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, but then you compare it to like South America and the more, they're baptizing like thousands, honestly.
Right, right. But
So
let's
then,
talk for just a second about why that is. Because in South America, these are poorer people than in Florida or anywhere else in the United States, right? And the church has some things to offer. If you're in poverty, the church offers some safety, some security. They do a lot of trickery with like, come and have a big meal at the church building. If you join the church, we'll take care of your family, that kind of attitude. So,
not to mention, this is about your heritage. This is about your ancestors, which they're also pulling back now, saying that the Book of Mormon
right.
isn't a literal record of the people in the Americas.
Yeah,
I spent my entire mission telling people that it was an actual record of the people of the Americas. And
right.
now, what are they telling us? No,
They've just
it's
it's not so much. Yeah, they've
they're
dialed
not.
it back gradually. The original introduction to the Book of Mormon stated unequivocally that the Native Americans in this country are descendants of the Lamanites in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah,
That was the first the original introduction. Then it became they're among the descendants of the Lamanites, and now they don't mention it at all.
yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
like anywhere from 200 to 300, and then that first full 12 months that he was there, I think they got up to 600. And
Wow,
then the
so
next
doubled it.
year, yeah. And then the next year, I remember when I was still there, we set a goal to hit. I still remember the meeting exactly. And we came up with a number, and it was 1050, 1050. And by
Wow.
then I was gone, but they hit it. They hit it that next year.
Wow. Wow. That seems like a lot. I think it's a lot for an American mission, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. But we were told it was the biggest percentage increase from year to year in North America.
Yeah. Wow. Well, he was successful implementing all of those things as far as the numbers are concerned. I'd be curious to know how many of those, converts were retained.
Not
How long
many.
did they stay in the church? How
I
long
mean,
did they pay their tithing?
yeah, I got pretty lucky. I think I baptized 20, and I would say
Wow.
one was a family of five. We baptized the whole family. And it was five, and The kids went on to BYU. They got married in the temple. I still
Wow.
kind of talk to them occasionally, but I don't think anyone else is,
Mm.
any of the others. And it's just
Wow.
that narcissistic abuse cycle. We were their whole world for a while, the missionaries and the
Mm.
church.
Yeah.
And we would go over there all the time. And then, by 5 years out of the mission, I'm not in contact with any of them. They've fallen away. And, that's on me. I did that. And the church,
Yeah, that's what they call it when someone stops attending church, that they've fallen away.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the in speak language just always strikes me. Whenever I recognize a phrase that's uniquely Mormon, I'm like, I have to call this out because it's part of my deprogramming too, so that I don't continue to use that those same phrases.
Yeah, and it's really an interesting feeling. Like this family, for example, these are amazing people. It was a really lucky thing. The mom had already had discussions previously, several years earlier. They moved to this area, and it just happened to be the assistance area. And so we got called that she wanted to go talk to the missionaries, and it was just a layup. Like we didn't, but we grew to love that family. We went over there all the time, and I still love them to this day. And their kids are married in the temple, and they've seen my stuff. They know I resigned from the church. Like I posted that
Yeah.
stuff, and I wonder what that's like. And a part of me wants to say I'm so sorry, but some people have a great experience, and
Yeah.
and they do. You can't discredit that, and maybe that's what they needed at the time, and maybe they absolutely love it. And there are people out there that do. I fear that, especially being a convert, you're not told everything, you know.
Right, right. And we've talked about this before. I don't think that I don't think that the church is all bad.
Mm-mm.
And I do recognize that it is really good for some people. Um, but I fight with myself so much about this because it's like when you do find out that you've been lied to, or at the very least, that things have been kept from you, because whether or not you believe that the 15 who lead the church know everything, or believe that, Joseph Smith made it up, or whatever, wherever you are on that spectrum, just it's an objective fact that the church leadership has kept facts from members.
Fact.
And when you find that out, it's devastating, and so while I don't want anybody to go through a faith crisis, necessarily, because it was devastating to me, I feel so much better on the other side. My life is definitely better on the other side. I would want to know the truth. So for me, I guess that's the question to ask, is like, if the church was not true, would you want to know?
A lot
Would
of
you
them say
want,
no.
huh? A lot of them say no, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are those personality styles that are like, just don't tell me. I don't want to know. Like, I'm happy where I am. This is working for me.
Hmm.
Um, it is existentially painful to stare into the abyss. It really is. Um, so I completely understand people who don't want to do it,
And
you
I
know?
think I even, in the famous words are, even if it wasn't true, I would still believe and live like this. And I think I said that for sure, because that's what it feels like. But I don't. When I found out it wasn't real, it mattered. Like I was like, no, I'm not staying.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it's like, wait a second. This whole time I've been shaming myself. I've been this other person because I set aside all those parts of me that didn't fit in Mormonism. So,
mm,
having said all of that about the fact that religion is good for some people, even the Mormon church is good for some people have a good
mm,
experience. Most Mormons are wonderful, beautiful people who are just trying to do good in the world. At the same time, the Mormon church has actively harmed so many people. There literally are people who are no longer alive because of their experience in the Mormon church. Their abuse is just rampant. And this is one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, is because the Mormon Church teaches you how to manipulate people in order to get what you want. And it also teaches you to cover up the dark parts, the shadow aspects of your personality, and to cover up your sins, because the social pressure and the consequences socially and spiritually are so high. The stakes are so unbelievably high that necessarily people are going to lie about what's really going on behind closed doors. They're going to lie about their dysfunctional relationships. They're not going to admit that they're abusers. Um, and I always say that any culture, society where perfectly normal, developmentally normal sexual expression is repressed, it's going to come out sideways and in dysfunctional ways. And I think that's why there is so much sexual abuse in the church. And the reason it gets covered up is because the church leadership doesn't want people to know how rampant it is. It's so incongruous to me with the early church, where Joseph Smith would literally put people's names in the Doctrine and Covenants, and they would be rebuked for the things that they were doing wrong. He would stand up in a meeting and he would say, brother so-and-so needs to repent. I wish there was more of that. As shameful as it is to call people out in public that way, it is shocking and disgusting to me how many abusers just move from place to place to place to place and never get held accountable.
Yeah.
That part of the Mormon church, that part of the culture is so disgusting and so harmful. And also just the treatment of the LGBTQ community, the shaming and the shunning that happens, where it says visitors welcome on the outside, but on the inside, if you're a trans person, you have to have a safe person go to the bathroom with you. It's just, I'm speechless
Yeah, and
sometimes about what
that
to
is,
even say.
you said you struggled, and I totally understand. It's like, yes, there are good people in the church, but it's like the abuser. It's literally an abusive organization. That's a fact. I don't.
Yeah.
You can try to argue with me on that, but it's a fact, and it's hurting people, and it's caused suicide. It has caused misery. It has caused how many, we have a lot of sexual things coming out now, but how many have just stayed silent and struggled their whole
Yes.
lives with it,
Yes.
that we don't know about? And so, okay, let's put ourselves in the church shoes. For the true church of Jesus, and we find out all this stuff, what do you do? You have to think, well, they probably assumed, well, we've got to cover this up, because if people find out, they'll leave the church and that'll ruin their salvation. So maybe there's just a few bad apples, but then they don't even, punish these people. So it's like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And are we afraid to punish them because then it will get out? And this is an abuser. This is a lying, narcissistic abuser who's covering up the shit that they do. People are always
Right.
like, well, it was fine for the time for Joseph Smith to do that. It was like, forget the time. Are you okay with a God that approves that?
Yeah. And I think that's the question that I ultimately had to ask myself before I examined truth claims, was, if I were choosing a religion for myself now, now having come through healing from all of the abuse that I suffered, is this what I would choose? And the answer was no. And the question for me now is it possible for the Mormon church to be a healthier organization? Is it possible for Mormonism to do it better, to do it in a healthy way? And the answer for me is no.
I'm the same way. I mean,
Because when you say they are an abuser, you're talking about the church. And we've had this conversation. This is what I'm going to continue to talk about all the time. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints operates as a narcissist in society. It is a narcissistic organization.
mhm.
Because of all of the traits that they exhibit and exemplify. They lie about who they are. They have this veneer in public the billboard says one thing, but on the back of the billboard, it's full of filth and disgusting abusers and horrible, horrible stories for so many people. So is it possible for Mormonism to be healthy? I would say no, because it was founded by arguably one of the most malignant narcissists that ever existed. Joseph Smith, I believe, started making up these religious ideas in order to spare his mom from suffering after the death of his brother. He started talking about heaven and the afterlife and what God wants for us in an effort to help his own family, right? But married with that was his treasure digging and his desire for power and control and to be seen as someone special. And I think he took it off the deep end. And when you have a religion that is founded in the ideals of shame and secrecy and narcissism, of like, we're the one true church. Joseph Smith said that he literally saw God and Jesus Christ. What is more grandiose or narcissistic than that? To say that God came to you and told you that all the churches on the earth were wrong, and that you are the one who is going to restore the true gospel of Jesus Christ. What is more grandiose or narcissistic than that? When it's founded on that, when its roots are in narcissism, is it possible for it to be healthy ever?
I don't think so. And I see all these, even ex-Mormons who are like, make these changes and da da da. And I get it. That's great. At least if we are stuck with this organization and corporation on the earth, let's at least make it tolerable where all marginalized people feel safe. That definitely needs to happen. But I'm with you, and like, there's nothing they could do outside of saying, sorry, it's all bullshit. Here is a great spiritual way to live, and we're sorry. Past that, no.
Yeah.
Let's improve it so people feel safe, so the abuse gets at least less.
Yeah.
Let's try to put some safeguards here so we don't go flying off the mountain if we have to go down this dangerous road.
Yeah. So I always try to fantasize a little bit about what it would look like if the Mormon church didn't exist. And the thought experiment always comes to, we're going to put something else in its place. There's always going to be religion. There's always going to be unhealthy religion. And there's always going to be the need for religion. So, get rid of, cut off one head off the hydra and another one is going to grow back. Right.
Yeah.
But in my little fantasy world, what I think is like, okay, the truth gets exposed. One of the quorum of the 12, let's say Uchtdorf is going to be the hero. He seems to be a little bit more, I don't know, outspoken. He got demoted, right? Maybe there's a chance that he's, got a little bit of more nuanced thinking or something like that. And he seems to be just a really kind man. I could be totally wrong about that. But let's say that Uchtdorf stands up in conference one Sunday and goes rogue and decides to say, I've been in the vault. I've seen the archives. Here's the proof, right? There's a gasp from the general conference center. Some people would leave, some people would stay, right? Eventually, I think the majority of the membership would leave, right? But the church has more money than God. So I think probably like the family members of the existing leadership would probably ensure that leadership continues, that the money gets passed down to those generations, and their sick little family lines can just go and, be comfortable with that money for the rest of their lives. And the church structure goes away. So at least people don't continue to get abused within this structure. I don't know.
No, it's a fun thought exercise. Golly, I just started smiling when you were like, imagine a world without the church. Honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. All that money's they would probably try to do something with that money.
Well, they own so much property,
Yes,
so
they do. The
corporation's always going to exist.
Right. And they expect accountability from their members, going to the bishop, all of that stuff. But you can tell the leadership of the church is not accountable for anything. they don't take
Yeah,
responsibility for anything. They
right.
don't apologize. That's what ticks me off the most. And I hope by bringing this up and talking about the core tenets of narcissism, that we can start to people can start to piece together, like, yeah, I guess they don't apologize. They kind of go back on their word. They never say, well, we did say this and we're sorry about that. We're actually going to say this now. No, it is all PR'd perfectly to
Right.
just make us think, we never taught that. We never taught that you were going to get your own planet. And you're like, excuse me?
Um, it's still actively teaching it, by the way. Jeffrey Holland just released a video where he literally said, "We believe that we're gods in embryo." So do your own, intellectual exercise with what that actually means, and realize that it does mean if you're a god in embryo, eventually you're going to have a planet over which you preside, where your spirit children are going to go through the same thing that we're going through right now, which, by the way, is the teaching of multiple mortal probations, for all the people who'd like to tell me that's not a thing. But I was thinking about this morning, getting ready for the interview. If we talked about red flags in a relationship, red
Mm-hmm.
flags, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
dating somebody and you're on the lookout for some red flags.
Mm-hmm.
A partner who says, "Oh, I don't apologize." Like if you were dating
Yeah.
somebody and you called them out on something, you're like, "Hey, last time we were together, you said this. It sounds like now you're saying something different." And you have proof, right? And they say, "Well, I don't apologize." Would you go out on another date with that person?
Absolutely not.
Would you
Absolutely.
continue that relationship? I just think it's, if you look at the church as a relationship, because it's your spiritual relationship. There are a lot of red flags.
Yeah, to me, like, I've talked to people who are like questioning, do you think this person is a narcissist? Can they be healed? And the number one thing that's really obvious, a telltale, is can they be accountable, and not only that, but and take responsibility. So church, huge red flag there. But also it has to be followed up with action. So you could say, yes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I will change. I will change. But if there is no change, that's still abuse, and that's still not taking accountability and responsibility. And the church hasn't even taken that step to say, I take
Right,
responsibility. I'm sorry. We'll
right.
change and we'll do this. They don't even bother with that shit. They're just like, yeah, well, we're just going to do whatever the hell we want. And you're
Yeah,
going to take
yeah.
it. You're just going to take it.
And yet this is one of the things that I tell people all the time. When you're dealing with a narcissistic person or a manipulative or controlling person, their ability to change or to heal is directly related to their ability to be self-aware, and their ability to repair after conflict, and their ability um, to look at a behavior and say, "Oh, yeah, that was harmful." So I always tell people, like, pay attention to how they respond when you withdraw. Pay attention to how they respond when you ask for change, or when you call out a behavior that's harmful. Because a person who's self-aware, who's willing to change, who wants to heal, who wants a healthy relationship, is going to respond in a positive way. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Let's work on that. And a person who is a narcissist or a manipulator or an abuser or a controlling person, they're going to get angry. They're
Yeah.
going to immediately put up a wall. It's immediately going to be a defensive position. And it's a lot of times they'll even like turn it back around on you, which is what the church does with ex-Mormons, by the way. Whenever we call out the church, they flip it around and they say, "Well, you must not have been faithful enough. You're not a true believer. You're a lazy learner. You didn't do your research. And now you're just angry and you're just trying to, you have an axe to grind against the church, and you can't
Yeah.
leave us alone."
You chose to be offended, and now you're just trying to destroy a perfectly good, church, and you're disrespecting me because these are sacred beliefs. I freaking hate
Right.
that. I'm like, I don't care
Yeah.
if they're sacred, they're abusive. Okay.
Right. Right.
That, and I hope that this conversation can start that, because it's backed by experts now. Like, it's known that these are what narcissists do. This is why it's
Yeah.
harmful. This is why you feel crazy. This is why it's abusive. It's spiritual abuse. It's emotional abuse, which, as you've mentioned, can be just as bad as a physical abuse. So
Yep.
they're going to gaslight us on that too. And
Yeah.
I'm now in these comments, and because I'll be watching an ex-Mormon thing, and there'll be a Mormon in the comments, and I made it a point to say, hey man, and I used your analogy. I said, hey, imagine, about the abuser, and you continue to see this abuser on the street lying to people when they abused me, they hurt me really bad. And I think we should look at that, because it might be a way to get people to understand, instead of just the arguing back and forth. It's just like, this is my perspective, and this
Right.
is what happened, and this is the abuse I suffered, and they're continuing to do that to others. And so it's really hard to just stand by and watch. And his reply was like, what are you even talking about? And I was just like, okay dude, I can't do it. But um
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's very obvious, and I hope this conversation keeps going, because everyone, narcissism, it's like a buzzword. It's like, ooh, ah. Well, organizations can be narcissists, and
Yes.
I, 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 my former partner, I know we talk about her a lot, but she did a lot for helping me see things, and
Yeah.
she knew a lot about the church because I explained my experience, and she was so fascinated by it and leaving it,
Hmm.
and how the church abused me. And this is hard to say. And she was like, you did the same thing to me.
Hmm.
And I don't think any Mormon wants to do that. I don't think they want to be taught how to be a narcissist and then hurt others.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my experience, people
Yeah.
of the church.
Thank you so much for just who you are, just for sharing this and for being willing to be vulnerable. That must have been devastating for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was plain and simple. And
Yeah.
it was
I'm so
it was
sorry.
eye-opening. But that can lead to healing, right? That
Yeah.
can lead to fixing it. And maybe people can start to see that about the church. And maybe it can be less damaging and abusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Thank
listen
you.
up,
Thank you.
brethren. You old farts, listen to us. Okay? We're not making this up.
Yeah.
Have a great day. I'm trying to heal. I'm sorry. I'm a healer in process here.
Yeah. This was our experience and it was real. And I know that there are so many members of the church out there who they feel threatened by what we say because it challenges their entire worldview. And I know how scary that is. And I know it's one of the reasons why so many Mormons double, triple down, quadruple down on what they believe when their beliefs get challenged, because it's really scary to consider the alternative, right?
I mean, we went through
Um,
that, and it was scary,
yeah,
right? You went through
yeah,
that. I went through that. It is not a fun thing. It's not something you want to do.
yeah. So I get it. I understand. I understand how scary it is. Just at the bottom, at the very, very core of it, if you can't look at the church and its teachings, if you can't look at the harm that the church does in society, just don't do any harm yourself. Just be a genuine Christ-like person with the motivation that you just want to do good in the world and you want to leave the world a better place than you found it. And just do that for your own life, for your own children. Like, do the most kind and loving thing. Like, actually consider what Jesus would do, when you're operating under the direction of the corporation, because that's what it is. At the end of the day, it is a corporation. It's not even a healthy organization. And I don't think that if Jesus Christ came to the earth today, that he would even recognize any of the things that he taught in what the corporation is doing today. So that's my bottom line. It's like, if you really do claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ, then emulate him more than you do the corporation.
Yes. If you believe in Jesus and all that, Jesus over corporation. think that's a great way to put it. And we're going to have to start coming up with ideas of how we can make this better and more tolerable. And it might have to come from us, and then they hear about it. And I think what you just said is a perfect example of that. Like it's easy to get on here and call stuff out and be angry, but what could be done? What could be fixed? And it's hard because, you know, the leadership at the top, they're not necessarily going to listen, but I'm assuming they know who John Dehlin is, you know?
Oh, yes, they
And
do.
yeah, and that's, you know, that's what sometimes has to be done.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me personally, the direction that I keep heading is that, okay, I can't do anything to change the corporation. They're never going to change. Because they are so narcissistic that they don't think there's anything wrong with them. They don't think they need to change, you
Yeah.
know? And so for me, what I would like to do is just engage in those activities that I think are going to help people. So having these conversations is part of that, but also, I mentioned during our last interview, the Church of Korihor, that they're out there,
Yeah.
you know, handing out blankets and doing good things in the community. And so I want to do more of that. I want to affiliate more with organizations who are doing that,
Great
and I
idea.
want to be a safe space and a safe person for people who are undergoing any kind of faith crisis or who are coming out of any abusive situation. I want to help heal the people who've been hurt by the organizations. And so I'm just going to put a plea out there for any of you who are watching, you know, to just address the audience, to just say, you know, thank you for being here, especially if you've watched all the way to the end of this. You know, thank you for at least listening to the conversation. You know, step 2 is share it with somebody. Send the video, share the video with somebody. Go follow Jonathan on his Instagram, TikTok. Go follow his podcast. Subscribe to the channel. Get it out there in the algorithm. You know, what we're learning about the algorithm is that YouTube doesn't push the videos out there. They actually pull the videos for the user of what the user is interested in. So fill your feed with more conversations like this about people who are leaving unhealthy organizations and relationships, so that more people will learn and understand the markers of manipulation and control, so that they won't be victimized. If you can just do that, like, subscribe, and share. That's all.
Greatness. She's got amazing things to say, and this is how it has to start, and this is how it has to go. And Megan, thank you for inspiring me to get more out there and speak more. And, you know, to all of the missionaries who served in my mission, you know who I am, and I'm sorry for sometimes being an arrogant prick, and I'm sorry for pushing you. And yeah, it was the programming, and I deep, just please forgive me.
Yeah, I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon. It's a real thing.
Oh, especially on my mission. Whoo!
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Well, Jonathan, as always, I could sit here and talk to you all day. Thank you so much for the conversation and for being who you are. And I look forward to everything that you're getting ready to put out there. I'm excited for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you as always for having me. I love these conversations. Love what you're doing. I hope you're
Thank
proud
you.
of yourself. I hope you're giving yourself some, I mean, you're a big deal and you're making a difference. And I hope
Thank you.
that people in the church can watch this. And there's things that can be done to mitigate abuse. Let's start there, you know?
Start with the kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not hurt any more kids.